In February, the government renewed their commitment to provide basic gluten-free products on prescription.
Bread and flour can be prescribed by GPs to adults and children who suffer from coeliac disease.
But 40% of England's clinical commissioning groups have already started withdrawing gluten-free food on prescriptions. One of those is Stoke-on-Trent.
Wheat, rye and barley are the main sources of gluten in diet. If a patient with celiac disease requires food such as bread and pasta, then gluten-free versions are widely available for sale through supermarkets, health food shops and online. There are other patients who have to follow strict dietary guidelines, for example diabetic patients. They also benefit from dietary advice available on the NHS, but don't get any extra support with following their diet. However, GPs will still be able to prescribe gluten-free foods to children and young people under the age of 18 years.
Unfortunately, the NHS has a pot of money in which all diseases and conditions have to be managed. If we had a limitless pot, absolutely in an ideal world, I think celiac should receive their prescriptions. But with the financial restraints from government, they've got a set budget, I think that all those treatments are weighed against cancer treatments, cardiac treatments, lung treatments. In the grand scheme of things, this is the reality of healthcare treatment, that they have to balance it. And it's a difficult one. It's a complex ethical issue, and it's not necessarily something that I agree with, on behalf of my patients, certainly.
We now have a postcode lottery in terms of prescription. Some areas will prescribe it, some areas will not prescribe it. That is not uniform treatment for this cohort of patients. Separate to that, there's a difference between availability and accessibility. Just because you go to a large supermarket and the free-from aisle may be 3 or 4 meters long. If you go to your local corner shop and that's as far as you can get, the chances are you're not going to find that range of product.
Bread and pasta aren't the only foods that people with celiac disease can't eat. Gluten's also found in cereals, cakes, sauces and even in some chocolate. 23-year-old Lauren Stanier was recently diagnosed with the incurable condition.
I was going to the toilet like 8 to 10 times a day. I'd eat something and I'd just get like major stomach cramps. I kind of put 2 and 2 together, that because I was being sick and having going to the toilet a lot, that my body just wasn't getting like any nutrients, which was why I was tired all the time. When I walked into the specialist, he was like, it is a life sentence and you can't eat any more gluten at all. It can't be cross-contaminated. Before, we were spending, I'd say, £30 a week on meats and like normal fruit and veg. Now, because I have to eat more meat, we get meat from the butchers, which is £80 a month. And then normal food shop is around £40 to £50 now, and that's just for vegetables and my alternative gluten-free foods.
International studies suggest that adherence to a gluten-free diet varies between 45 to 90% of people with celiac disease, and if not followed, it can lead to malnutrition, weakened bones, cancer of the small bowel and unexplained fertility problems. Financial burdens are one of the biggest reasons why people may not follow the gluten-free diet, and with many people in Stoke-on-Trent turning to food banks, I want to know what they're doing to help.
One of the plans that we have is that we will focus on getting together a couple of boxes of gluten-free, lactose-intolerant type foodstuffs and keeping those in distribution centres, so that if someone does turn up with that particular problem, then we can address it.
Food banks accept all sorts of specialist food donations, including gluten-free, but how do you know what does and doesn't contain gluten?
There are other groups beyond the free-from section. So naturally gluten-free products include fruits and vegetables, fresh, frozen, dried, canned. They're important sources of fibre and phytonutrients and antioxidants. We also talk about meat, fish and poultry in their natural state and naturally gluten-free.
You need to look at the label in order to discern that, because it varies and some labels haven't got that information on.
I've got an app on my phone, so I scan anything I'm unsure about and then it'll tell me straight away whether it suits my allergies or it doesn't.
With an ever-expanding selection in the supermarkets and no end in sight for the squeeze on NHS budgets, it's unlikely celiac disease sufferers in Stoke-on-Trent will be seeing gluten-free products back on prescriptions anytime soon.